I'm going to be speaking from some notes here. I've had some able assistance and I've added some notes. You won't see anything on the screen except what you have. But I'm going to give you a bit of history and a bit of where we are with LDRD in the nation and where we are going forward. So to begin with some of the history, since the Atomic Energy Act of 1954, and as amended since then, Congress has recognized the value of the national labs by providing the lab directors discretion to pursue what was originally called employee-suggested research. From the days of the AEC, this endorsement continued to the ERDA, if you remember that, Energy Research and Development Administration. In 1977, Congress, that was the same year that I entered the national security complex that we have going to Sandia, as Jamila mentioned. Congress granted authority for Laboratory-Directed Research and Development, or LDRD. Then the Defense Authorization Act of 1991 specifically authorized LDRD for long-term science and technology vitality of the laboratories in national security-related scientific and technical disciplines. So it's particularly appropriate that the topic for this year's event is nuclear security. It's a core part of what we do. The legislation also enabled LDRD really to be the primary mechanism for funding cutting-edge research and development and to maintain the scientific vitality of DOE and the NNSA national labs. Well, the NNSA LDRD program today also includes similar programs at the Nevada National Security Site. It's called Site-Directed Research and Development, or SDRD. At the production plants, it's called PDRD, Plant-Directed Research and Development. The ratios, the funds are a bit different in percentages, but these are very important to the core creativity of each of these institutions, whether they be Nevada, the labs, or the plants. The intent of this is not only to give the beginning and the emphasis of creativity, but to provide funding for research that might not otherwise be supported through normal programmatic work. Addressing problems that have significant impact on America's prosperity, on security, and on international prominence, all of those are important. The kinds of problems that we face cannot be resolved through only incremental advances in science and technology today. The world is moving too fast. It's a multilateral world after the end of the Cold War, as all of you know, and the threat spectrum is changing even in the time that I'm speaking this morning. So, leveraging the NNSA site's long history of expertise in national security, the LDRD program invests in a multidisciplinary portfolio of really what we call breakthrough science and technology to address these emerging threats. I'm going to come back to that. But in short, it means intentionally high risk. And not everything works, and that's okay. So I want to mention first thanks to to Nevada and to the labs and plants for being here. Within each lab, the chief technology officers agreed to do an external review of their program, and this meeting today is one of the venues for doing that. The posters are important, the principal investigators are important, so follow Jamila's advice and really try to spend some time with the PIs. You know, they may know who you are, you might not know who they are, but this kind of interaction is the kind that changes the careers of people who are early in their career or midstream in their career. So for a moment, I want to just speak to the PIs within the group here. You've heard I had background at Sandia and then went on to some other things. I can remember in the time that I was just at Sandia, and I think if you talk to anybody from one of the elements of our complex, they'll have probably closest knowledge of what happened at their site. But if I just looked over some of the years, Sandia had LDRD programs in computing and was the first laboratory to break the teraflop barrier. I can't remember what year it was, but that was not just the beginning, it was an important step forward, and since then we've gone to petaflop computing, and we're now on our way to exaflop computing. Right in the core of Sandia's mission space in radiation hardening for nuclear weapon electronics. good amount of LDRD has been invested for those kinds of things that are breakthrough, not typical programmatic work, but breakthrough things. In one area I can remember LDRD that funded, I recall it was Gordon Osborne, strained layer superlattices. How one can go to the matrix of silicon from that, which has a certain spacing, to compounds. Whether 3 5s or 2 6s, you build up one layer at a time, you build strain in, and the thing doesn't break, and actually gets a remarkable ability in the area of microtechnologies. More recently, LDRD started some of the work on the Z machine, isentropic compression. Really a rather different area of hydrodynamics than hugonios, which are the endpoint. You plot a hugonio, that's the endpoint of shocks in the measurement. Isentropic compression, you can get all of the compression along an adiabat, and then on release you can get a great deal of information. So those are really breakthroughs. And again, as I said, talk to anybody who has experience at an institution. I think you would hear a similar thing. Particularly at Los Alamos and Livermore, some of the core work in plutonium aging started out with LDRD. It was a persistent problem, not knowing what the lifetime was actually going to be. It's different in each of the weapon systems because of plutonium composition, which we won't go into here today, is different, and the system application is different. But today we have confidence in our weapons because of key work in that area that really began with LDRD. So now, I said some of this about risk. Within the Department of Energy, we occasionally find ourselves just judging risk almost in absence of benefit. Obviously not the right thing to do, but when we do that, or if any of you do that at your home institutions and you're presented a problem, do you want to do this thing that's low risk, or do you want to do that thing that's high risk? Well, low risk wins every time. It's the wrong kind of value proposition. Our job is to make good judgments on benefit, cost, schedule, and risk, and get the ensemble right. And to get big benefit often requires taking on risk. Now, it's not unmanaged risk. We have very good techniques for managed risk, but that's important. LDRD, in some sense, is intentionally risky business. And we can think of it that way. And so doing things that are incremental with LDRD is not the right path. I would like to say, I'm getting to the summary, some of the facts about LDRD. So you can just sit back and think about what this means. LDRD impact takes a form of increased patent activity, R&D 100 awards, and growth in the number of publications and citations over the years. I've looked at the history. Sometimes we're growing in publications, sometimes we're receding in publications. When the LDRD program is really taking on some substantial work and risk, actually the publications go up because there's fundamentally new insight. Despite accounting for less than 8%, that's the upper limit cap on LDRD, authorized by Congress for the NNSA labs budgets, the LDRD produces more than 20% of labs refereed publications. So think of that, it's a multiplier of 2.5. It's a big deal. It produces more than 30% of all patents, even a bigger deal. And it produces 60% of the R&D 100 awards from just 8% of the funding, which intentionally is directed by the chiefs at the labs and plants and Nevada site, not micromanaged by DOE. Not that we'd ever do any micromanagement. Yeah. So LDRD is also a very effective recruiting tool. Postdocs, if you look at how many postdoc researchers who are an important source of laboratory employment, in cutting-edge scientific and technical talent, postdocs are supported by LDRD for about half of the lab postdocs. So, this doesn't mean that LDRD should be only for postdocs, but it's a good way to get them really challenged on some problems that haven't already been solved, while they're also being trained to deal with some of the heavier issues in nuclear security and doing it the right way. Driving all LDRD directed research, above all, is a vision for more secure, more prosperous future in America. National security innovations cannot really be planned or legislated. People have tried to do that, doesn't really work. But they can be encouraged, they can be supported, they can be stimulated, and they can be managed. And that's really the intent of LDRD and SDRD and PDRD. The intent is to have flexibility, to focus on forward-looking natures of these programs that enable the labs, the plants, and Nevada site to accomplish some of the long-range, innovative research that directs the funding and the future for where the programs are going. LDRD has also been used to drive directly to some mission needs to validate things that we couldn't do before, like the security of a nuclear arsenal and a nuclear deterrent more broadly in the absence of underground testing. Next year, 2012, will be the 20th year since the beginning of the underground test moratorium. And yet, we have statements from the lab directors which don't come easy, come from a tremendous amount of good work, that they retain confidence in the stockpile and in the capability of the deterrent more broadly, which means people, facilities, practices, and not just warheads and weapons. So with that, I'd like once again to thank Jamila and the organizing team for this event.
Thank you, Don, very much.